The date is August 26, 1991. The hallowed arena of Madison Square Garden pulses with an almost palpable energy, a vibrant tapestry woven from the cheers and roars of thousands. Tonight, it is the stage for Summerslam, the World Wrestling Federation's annual spectacle, and the air is thick with anticipation. On the surface, everything is gold. The production is flawless, and the spectacle is grand, a testament to the Federation's peak golden era. In a masterclass of high-octane drama, the main event is a tag team match pitting the reigning champion Hulk Hogan alongside the Ultimate Warrior against the Triangle of Terror, consisting of Sergeant Slaughter, General Adnan, and Colonel Mustafa. The crowd is on its feet, each move met with a wave of sound, culminating in a triumphant victory for the heroic tandem. It is seemingly a perfect evening, a testament to the power of good vanquishing evil, a joyous celebration of professional wrestling at its most popular. Yet beneath this glittering veneer of success, a storm, silent but devastating, is brewing. For the Ultimate Warrior, the celebrations were short-lived, the euphoria of victory swiftly eclipsed by a stark, cold reality. As the echoes of applause faded, a letter dated precisely August 26, 1991, found its way into his hands. It was from Vince McMahon, and its message was unequivocal. You threatened to stay at home, thereby not even appearing at Titan's major summer pay-per-view event SummerSlam. I had no choice but to accede to your exorbitant demands. This was a serious mistake on your part. The words painted a picture of capitulation, a forced hand, a bitter concession. McMahon later, under oath, would shed further light on the true nature of this agreement, testifying that the company's decision to accede to Warrior's demands was merely a temporary measure, a desperate ploy to ensure his appearance at the SummerSlam event. The illusion of a mutually beneficial partnership, so carefully constructed for the public eye, shattered, revealing a fraught relationship, a battle of wills that simmered just beneath the surface of the wrestling world. This wasn't merely a contract dispute, it was a profound clash of titans, a precursor to years of animosity that would define one of the most tumultuous relationships in professional wrestling history. So why did Vince McMahon truly hate the Ultimate Warrior? The answer lies not in a single incident, but in a confluence of factors that struck at the very core of McMahon's operational philosophy and personal sensibilities. At the heart of their discord was Warrior's notoriously unpredictable nature. Unlike many of his contemporaries who meticulously followed directives, Warrior marched to the beat of his own drum, often veering off script, improvising during matches, and generally exhibiting an autonomy that directly challenged McMahon's meticulously crafted, highly controlled environment. This unpredictability, while perhaps endearing to some fans for its raw, unbridled energy, was anathema to a promoter who prized order and narrative precision above all else. Beyond the in-ring chaos, Warrior's career was punctuated by frequent and often acrimonious contractual disputes. These were not merely polite negotiations. They were often characterized by ultimatums and demands, tactics that McMahon, a shrewd businessman himself, undoubtedly perceived as disrespectful and even extortionate. The SummerSlam 1991 incident stands as the most infamous example of this holding-up strategy. Warrior, a pivotal figure in the main event of one of the year's biggest shows, leveraged his position to demand a significant pay raise, effectively putting McMahon in an untenable position. To cancel the main event or replace Warrior at the last minute would have been a catastrophic blow to the company's reputation and financial stability. McMahon, a master strategist, was forced to capitulate, but the resentment this act fostered was deep and long-lasting. Such a move, born of necessity rather than agreement, would undoubtedly breed a profound sense of betrayal in a man who saw his business as an extension of himself. Moreover, Warrior was widely regarded as difficult to deal with backstage. His often erratic behavior, coupled with his self-professed intellectual superiority, created a challenging working environment for colleagues and management alike. For McMahon, a figure who valued loyalty and control perhaps above all else, Warrior's independent streak and perceived insubordination were constant sources of frustration. McMahon built an empire on a foundation of absolute authority. He was the architect, the visionary, the undisputed leader. Any challenge to this authority, particularly one as persistent and public as Warrior's, was met with fierce resistance. The animosity reached such a fever pitch that Warrior was effectively blacklisted from the company for many years, a powerful statement of McMahon's displeasure. The ultimate testament to this deep-seated resentment came in the form of the infamous DVD, The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, a highly unusual and scathing condemnation of a former star's legacy. It was an unprecedented move, a clear indication of the lingering bitterness and a public airing of grievances that went far beyond typical business disagreements. While they eventually reconciled, famously leading to Warrior's Hall of Fame induction shortly before his untimely passing, the years of intense personal and professional friction were undeniable, a stark illustration of the deep chasm that had once existed between two powerful, unyielding personalities. The narrative of Vince McMahon's animosity extends far beyond the theatrical disputes with the Ultimate Warrior, delving into even darker, more volatile territories with individuals like Nailz. Here, the reasons for McMahon's hatred transcend mere creative differences or financial squabbles, plunging into the realm of alleged physical assault and profound legal betrayal. The incident that fundamentally shattered any semblance of a professional relationship occurred backstage in 1992, following a match. A heated dispute erupted between Nailz and McMahon over a pay issue, rapidly escalating from a verbal confrontation to a physical altercation. The specifics remain contentious, with conflicting accounts, but the common thread is that Nailz allegedly assaulted Vince McMahon. In the highly controlled and hierarchical world of professional wrestling, an act of physical violence against the promotion's owner, particularly within the confines of his own dominion, was an unforgivable offense, a direct challenge to his authority, his physical safety, and the very structure of his empire. Such an act would not only provoke immediate dismissal, but also ignite a deeply personal and enduring hatred. However, the animosity did not cease with the alleged assault. It deepened and became irrevocably entrenched when Nailz took his grievances beyond the confines of the locker room and into the legal arena. In 1994, Nailz testified against Vince McMahon during the infamous steroid trial, a high-stakes federal case that threatened to dismantle McMahon's entire business and even land him in prison. Nailz's testimony was damning. He claimed McMahon pressured him to use steroids, a direct accusation that struck at the heart of the prosecution's case. This was not a mere breach of contract or a backstage disagreement. This was an act of profound betrayal, a former employee actively working to incriminate and potentially imprison the company's leader in a federal court of law. For McMahon, a man known for his unwavering demand for loyalty from his employees, this act would have been perceived as the ultimate treachery. The very idea of someone he had employed and elevated turning against him in such a public and damaging manner would undoubtedly have fueled a deep, visceral hatred. The steroid trial was a watershed moment for the Federation, a period of immense existential threat, and anyone who contributed to that threat would have been indelibly marked as an enemy. Nailz, through his testimony, became not just a disgruntled former employee, but a perceived adversary, a weapon used by the state against McMahon's very livelihood. This level of perceived disloyalty and active antagonism would have solidified an unyielding animosity that few others would ever experience from Vince McMahon. It was a wound that, for McMahon, would likely never truly heal. Finally, we turn our attention to Jesse, the Body Ventura, a charismatic and outspoken figure whose relationship with Vince McMahon became irretrievably fractured due to a confluence of ideological clashes and significant legal battles. Ventura's fundamental transgression, in McMahon's eyes, was his audacious attempt to unionize Federation wrestlers in the late 1980s. This was not a minor disagreement. This was a direct existential threat to McMahon's long-standing business model and his absolute control over his talent. For decades, McMahon had operated the Federation as an independent contractor system, a structure that afforded him immense flexibility and shielded him from the complexities and costs associated with employee benefits, collective bargaining, and union demands. A unionized workforce would have fundamentally altered the power dynamic, shifting significant leverage away from management and towards the performers. McMahon, a shrewd and fiercely independent businessman, vehemently opposed any such collective organization, viewing it as an unwarranted intrusion into his domain and a direct challenge to his authority. Ventura's efforts were thus perceived as an act of subversive rebellion, an attempt to dismantle the very foundation of McMahon's carefully constructed empire. This ideological clash alone would have been sufficient to breed deep resentment, as it struck at the core of McMahon's operational philosophy and his vision for professional wrestling. However, the animosity escalated significantly when Ventura sued McMahon in the mid-1990s, successfully winning a landmark lawsuit regarding unpaid royalties for his extensive work as a commentator. This legal battle was not merely about money, it was about control, ownership, and the financial interests of the company. McMahon, renowned for his tight control over all aspects of his business, including intellectual property and revenue streams, would have viewed this lawsuit as a profound challenge to his authority and financial acumen. The fact that Ventura prevailed in court, forcing McMahon to pay out significant sums, would have been a bitter pill to swallow. For McMahon, losing such a case was not just a financial setback, it was a public humiliation, a defeat that challenged his reputation as an invincible corporate titan. The combination of unionization attempts and successful legal battles over money represents two of the biggest red flags for Vince McMahon. Unionization symbolized a direct assault on his control and autonomy, while legal battles over royalties were a direct attack on his financial interests and perceived ownership of his talent's contributions. Ventura's actions, therefore, struck at the very core of what McMahon valued most: absolute control and financial solvency. These were not minor grievances, they were perceived betrayals that directly threatened the integrity and profitability of his enterprise. The deep, lasting resentment that resulted from these protracted conflicts was thus entirely understandable from McMahon's perspective. Ventura, through his persistent challenges to the established order and his willingness to pursue legal recourse against his former employer, solidified his place as one of the few individuals Vince McMahon harbored a profound and enduring hatred for, a hatred born from a fundamental clash of wills and a direct threat to the very essence of the McMahon empire.